The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Welcome to the Mind, Body, Spirit show. I think you're going to find this very interesting because this is about gluten. And the one thing that I've learned from maybe rereading these 5 books, I'm going to show you the cover some later, so maybe you won't have to read them. I'll quote for them, but they're good references. How common actually that it is, and you can see that road there, get tested. I think everyone should be tested for it, because it has 250 symptoms related to it. So, and some people have no symptoms, yet their body is being ravaged by gluten diseases. So let's get started, okay? Celiac disease is not very common, and that is associated with gluten. Maybe 1% of the people have it, 1 in 130, something like this. Actually, a lot higher than that you would think. In other countries like Australia, they check every person. They check their blood for gluten and run some other tests, which I'll teach you about. In this country, maybe 7%. So what do you think is happening? We're missing a lot of diseases which are preventable, treatable. So get tested. I'll tell you in a little bit what that is. So we have celiac disease, and I'll tell you the symptoms and what it affects in a little bit. And then there is gluten sensitivity. About 10% of the people are sensitive to gluten, so they can eat a little bit of it, and certain things react, and they're sensitive to it. There's a spectrum. For some, it's many foods. Some, it's just one food. For some, it's just a glass of wine or a beer or a piece of bread. But in celiac disease, there's no medication. There's only one way to get rid of it: no gluten, not even one molecule. You'll react to even one molecule. So I'll teach you more about it. Like I said, about 150 to 200 diseases are related to gluten, all avoidable. So you see what I mean? So when we get blood tests and sugar tests and things, we should be testing, I think, 100% of the people for gluten. And I think even children, because it can affect newborns, yes. And I think the Pediatric Society is missing the boat here. We need to check children for gluten. And you've heard me from other shows too. I think we should be getting serum insulins to catch diabetes very early, including type 1 and type 2. And gluten is related to type 1 diabetes, where there's no insulin. It's actually related to that and is a partial cause of it. So that's the reason I'm a little bit passionate. I like prevention. I don't want you to have these diseases, okay? So what is gluten? Let's speak about that in a minute. It's a yellowish, gray, powdery mixture of plant proteins from wheat, rye, and barley, okay? They include oats a lot, although oats don't have gluten, but oats are commonly contaminated by gluten, so they put that on the list. And also stamps, for example, that you put on a letter, that's gluten paste. So it's very sticky. In a mixture and food, it holds things together. So the gluten flour makes it ideal for baking because you can add some carbon dioxide to it and then heat it, and it enlarges it. So they use it in donuts and muffins, and so it makes it ideal for baking, and because the flour will break down eventually down to sugar. It has a high glycemic index. And what does sugar do? It makes us feel great. I'm in heaven. So we have a donut, we have a cookie, we have a muffin, and we feel great, but it could be making us sick, okay? So the molecules, which is the smallest substance of a chemical, okay, would be a molecule, okay? Traps carbon dioxide because it's sticky and expand when heated. And they use it for other things as mentioned. So it acts like a glue. You can knit it together, make a ball, and actually throw it. Yeah. Not like a tennis ball will stick to my paddle. Okay? So, but you could see it would be in things like pizza, cookies, muffins, bagels. It stabilizes things. It's a thickener. So you're starting to get the idea. Okay, and it's used in other consumer products. For example, medications, marinades, coffees, condiments, packed spices, postage stamps, adhesives. For example, lipstick, hairsprays. I use some hairspray to make his hair stick together. That's what makes it a little bit hard, thank God, or it'd be flying all over the place. So it's a lot of things. But if you don't tolerate it and it's making you sick, get rid of it. If you have celiac disease, which is not just bowel symptoms, okay? It's other symptoms in your body, you have to get rid of it. No exceptions. No exceptions. Because you'll react to even a molecule of it. But if you're just sensitive to it, you can, over time, maybe determine what you can get away with. Although there's almost a non-gluten substitute for any food you can think of. I don't care if it's a toast or muffins, you can get gluten-free today. There are enough websites, which we'll speak about, that don't think because I said you got gluten sensitivity or you got celiac disease, it's the end of your life. No way. There's substitutes. You can lead a wonderful life. Okay? So there are some naturally, okay, gluten-free foods. Okay? For example, buckwheat, corn, millet for example, quinoa for example, fruits, vegetables, meat, chicken, fish, nuts, seeds, eggs, spices, rice are gluten-free. Yes, you can eat rice. The trouble is rice is a sugar high in the glycemic index, and if you're eating an awful lot of rice, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're going to gain weight, and you may become diabetic. Another problem. So those two things can be related. So where's gluten found? In wheat and barley and rye, and contaminants in oats, for example, and the other things we spoke about. But grains are off limits. Grains are off limits, okay? Wheat, very ancient food. It's the second most popular grain, actually. Corn is gluten-free, for example. So the following all contain some wheat, and therefore they have gluten in them. So wheat is clearly the main enemy, okay? Bran, the outer layer of wheat grain, is used to enhance cereals and muffins, is gluten-id. Bulgur, dried, crushed form, couscous, all over North Africa has gluten in it. Some meat, if it's put in vegetable stew, for example, could have gluten in it. Durum is a macronutrient in wheat. Another name for it is triticum. Triticum Triticin has a gluten in it, so it's off the menu. Okay, einkorn, that is a wheat that has to be avoided. Okay, emmer is another one in breads and soups, and they grow einkorn a lot because it's easier to grow, and I think it kind of went all over we spread wheat all over the world when it was invented, and that helped people to live. But we also gave them a disease, gluten sensitivity, celiac disease. So there was a benefit, but we also have to know what it does. Farina, graham flour, kamut, mezzo, orzo, Japanese crumbs, panko. Even we put it in some meat substitutes. For example, seitan is gluten meat. Gluten meat is a meat substitute if you don't eat meat, but it's a plant protein, and it has gluten in it. Okay, that's too bad. So it's a meat substitute in vegetable dishes. Semolina is wheat ground to flour. Pastas, for example, can have gluten in it. Spelt. The key ingredient in rye flours, it goes in breads, and pumpernickel have gluten in them. Lower gluten but increased fiber. So in a way it's healthier because it's fiber, but it has a gluten in it. You must avoid it. So this gets more interesting now and more serious. What is celiac disease? Celiac disease is a disease of the gut, but other parts of the body too, and it's highly genetic. So you can run genetic tests, make a diagnosis. You can run blood tests and make a diagnosis, and we'll discuss those tests also. You can collect stool, you can collect saliva, all things we'll discuss. So celiac disease is a digestive disorder. It starts with the gut, characterized by toxic reaction of gluten, a protein. The protein in certain wheat, rye, and bulgur, And remember we mentioned triticin, So it is highly hereditary. So if someone in the family has it, other family members, remember I said the incidence is like 1 in 133 in the whole world, and it's seen in all racial groups, all ethnic groups, no exceptions, But that's 1 in 130 or so, but if you have like brothers and sisters, for example, the odds of getting it maybe 1 in 20, a little more distant, say 1 in 30. So there's a higher incidence in immediate relatives. So it's hereditary. It's in the gene pool. There are not many hereditary diseases based on your genes. And, Parkinson's disease, others, Alzheimer's, some of these are genetic, and we can name maybe 100 more. But on top of the list with the highest incidence is gluten. Celiac disease, and it's on top of the list as being the highest incidence of genetic disease. Remember, I said 1 in about 130, and if you're an immediate relative, then the odds, go higher. So it's in the gene pool. It's chronic, long term. It can happen to a baby. It can happen to an older person. It can manifest any of the ages, depending on what they're eating. Sometimes an emotional stress will set off the attack. So your genetic structure you may be born with, but it may not manifest, although it manifests in children, some. It can manifest at any age. So if the symptoms come along, which I'll be speaking about, get a gluten test. Like I said, I think we should test children for it. You got to know what are your gluten numbers. In this country, 7% get tested. That's a mistake, and I lay it at the feet of the medical profession. We're the ones responsible, okay? We're the ones responsible. So it's not an allergy, okay? And only one treatment for celiac disease, avoidance. So just my talk here may wake you up to get a test, but I am not the final answer. You need to look at references, some of the books I'll hold up, and some of the websites. This disease requires education. You can go to YouTube, Rudy Cashman, Gluten, about maybe 10 TV shows show up. You can watch those, help start the educational process, but you need to read some books in more detail. Okay, a good one I like here is Living Gluten-Free for Dummies, a book by Dana Korn, K-O-R-N. I'll hold it up for you. Tremendous references in there. And if you just want to read one book, read this one. I'll hold up some others lately, but this has got the website. It has the references, YouTube shows. You need to read this. And just watching my show today will not be the final answer, but it may save your life. It may open the door for you to seek knowledge. And if you can find a healthcare provider who has some knowledge about this disease, many do not. They'll deny and say, oh, I don't want to run those tests. You must be the gatherer of information, because in medical school they teach us very poorly. That's in all these books, not just what I say, I know. It's in all these books that we know in this country. You would not believe it. In this country, if you have symptoms, maybe it takes 10 years before they'll diagnose you correctly. 10 years. In Europe, 1 year. Australia, probably the first doctor's visit. Okay? I remember a famous Robert Lustig, very famous. You see him on YouTube. Doctor was visiting Australia, and he went to a doctor's office. He was there at a conference, and he had all kind of pictures of people who had had lupus, which is an autoimmune disease, which causes lupus is one of them. He had pictures of the cured people on his wall. And that's when Dr. Lustig woke up and realized the significance of gluten testing. Okay, so it's not an allergy, okay? It does bring out people who have celiac disease because it affects the mucosa of the small bowel, not the large bowel, the small bowel, okay, the ileum, okay, and the jejunum. Because if your doctor says, besides, suppose you're positive on a genetic test, and he says, let's do a colonoscopy, wrong test, wrong part of the gut. This is an upper part of the GI tract is affected, okay? The jejunum, the ileum, they are affected, not the colon. So the correct test is to be scoped from above to get a biopsy. And that's part of the testing. We'll go into that more after. There are some other names for celiac disease: sprue, non-tropical sprue, gluten-sensitive enteropathy. There's some other names, but celiac disease is the most common name. So the gluten damages the tiny villi. Our gut has in them, to get more surface area to your gut for you to absorb things, it has villi that's sort of like this. They go up and down, and they're packed together, one cell layer thick. And between those cells, we there's a chemical called zonulin. And this is the guy that opens and closes this gate. And if the level of zonulin is too high, the gate opens up, and now you have a hole in your gut, and your food, not fully digested, will go through this hole, get in the bloodstream, and your body thinks, I'm being attacked. And your Army, Navy, and your Air Force, your immune system attacks the food coming through, and that's the reaction, okay? So you have a hole in your gut, and you're having autoimmune reaction, and that causes diseases of the gut, but other parts of the body. But the problem starts in the gut, and the reason it starts, it affects other parts of the body, for example, the brain, because our neurotransmitters that run between the axon and the dendrite that jump across to send the message along, they use the same proteins in the brain as in the gut. They're quite similar. So people can come in with epilepsy, seizures, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, memory loss, blindness, numbness in the arms, legs, neuropathy, paralysis, all sorts of symptoms. They can come in not related to the gut, and you may have no gut symptoms at all. And that's the reason for the delay in diagnosis. Some have a rash. Some have some have very itchy rashes. And for example, they'll have scabs on the elbows and on the knees, and they're very itchy. And if they biopsy them, they can make a diagnosis. Pediformis is one red, very itchy, extremely itchy rash, and it's due to gluten. I've seen this a number of times, and people. I remember seeing you can have joint pains. I remember my banker 10 years ago. I went in to see all the time. Maybe she's 45 years old. She's constantly complaining of joint pains. Yeah, and she's not that old. I didn't think she had severe arthritis as such. So when I was just doing a TV show or reading some books on gluten, I asked her, get a gluten test. Then I didn't see her for 3 months. What happened was her doctor treated it first, wondered about it, sent her to a rheumatologist, and he put her just on steroids. Didn't really test for gluten. And with steroids, you can get aseptic necrosis of a joint. It can happen. And you know what happened to her? And what happened? She eventually had aseptic necrosis of the hip and the knee, and they had to replace both of them. Then 3 months later, she's back. I said, well, did they run a gluten test? No, I didn't run a gluten test. Neither did the rheumatologist or family doctor. I just believe you, and I went gluten-free, and I feel great. That's a true story. That's a true story, but she had to go through a lot. Now she has an artificial knee, an artificial joint. That can happen from gluten. Okay? And what the gluten will do is take these villi, which are hairy things that have the surface area of a tennis court, that absorb nutrients, phytochemicals, proteins into, and they guard, they allow those substances to be digested and enter the bloodstream, and if they're the right size, the body doesn't react. But eventually, the gut flattens out, becomes flat. The villi go away. Actually, that's sort of in stages. So if they do a biopsy, they might find some villi gone, some are flattened, some lost their hair. So they have about 5 stages. I think it's MASON stages. That's the name of a doctor. He has those 5 stages of the villi, and they can diagnose with that whether you have gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, but no final diagnosis. It takes other tests. So sensitivity, we mentioned, only about 5% of the people in this country have gluten sensitivity. They get a serious reaction to something they're eating, and then and it doesn't kill them, and they get over in a few hours. So undiagnosed. We diagnose maybe 5% of the people who have a problem, okay? And it takes 10 years in this country for us to make a diagnosis. What about complications? Remember I told you about 100, 250 symptoms, 150 or so potential complications, increased rates of cancer. A lot of cancer is related to people with gluten problems. Yeah. Also, in children, a lot of times, they'd be very short people. Yeah. They have osteoporosis. They don't develop properly, and it's characteristic of children who have celiac disease. The midgets. It can be very serious, actually. It can manifest early in age, but as they're supposed to be growing, they're constantly not meeting the height. They can be underweight, look like they're starving to death, or they can be obese. Either way, so it can be confusing. Remember I said, get tested, okay? If you see a child or an adult with many broken bones, for example, and they haven't been in a truck accident, you got to worry about them, especially if they have a broken bone without an injury. Think of celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, okay? So, but why does it happen to some people? They carry the gene. That's one thing. Maybe they're eating the wrong food, okay? Eating wheat, bulgur, okay? Rye regularly, big-time bread eaters, more likely to get this, okay? And sometimes those diseases are set off by an emotional event. They're going, leading their life, no problem, no short stature, no symptoms, 50 years old and death of a spouse, or a bad accident or financial failure, and they manifest a celiac disease. Mm-hmm. So it can happen any time in a person's life. Keep that in mind, okay? And the symptoms can be thyroid disease, GI disease, can be rashes, can be reflux, for example, can be dementia, can be blindness, can be all kind of gum diseases, throat diseases, cancers of the throat, cancers of the tongue, falling out teeth, poor enamel in the teeth. I can just keep on going down the line. I'll review this more with you in a little bit. As a villi dies down, at the tip of this villi, they're sort of shaped like this, except very small. At the very tip is the enzyme that breaks down the milk, the enzyme in milk. Okay, the lactase. Okay, the milk sugar, galactose. Okay, that's that enzyme's job. But since you have celiac disease, you don't have that enzyme, and you develop an allergy to milk. Mm-hmm. And milk, can cause other things. It can cause acne. I know I had as a child. I had these little pustules all over the face. It was due to milk. Had anything to do with gluten? I don't know, but I stopped drinking milk, and the problem went away. And so milk is part of this, milk sensitivity. Let's get a diagnosis. Hey, have I got it? For example, let's talk about things. You can order a celiac panel. Your doctor can order that. And there are all kinds of enzyme tests. The one that is the most accurate is tissue transglutamine. Okay, tissue transglutamine, TG, IG, and IgG. Okay, that's the most accurate test. If you were to go to LabCorp or any test up in DuPont, they would order that, and that would, if that indicates you have that antibody, that's a reaction to you presenting that molecule at the gut level. If that's positive, odds are you have celiac or gluten sensitivity. Yeah, probably have celiac disease actually. And there's three or four other tests you can do: AGA, IGI. These are other tests that's part of this panel. If they're positive, then that's specific for it because they can be positive for other illnesses. And as I already mentioned, and remember that this blood screening, the celiac panel, your doctor can order that. Almost any lab does it. Then the next step, suppose they are positive, genetic testing, and you can start with genetic testing actually, where they can find something to test like your stool, it could be your saliva. You actually can, without a doctor's order, go online and do some testing where you spit into a tube, you send it back in a week, you get the result back, and that will tell you, give you a list of genetic reactions and tells you the odds of you having celiac disease or maybe sensitivity. So that's a fairly new, no doctor's thing and needed. You'd have to pay for it yourself, but I don't think it's that expensive, although you might check the cost. Okay. Another thing they're doing is, so you can spit into a tube, they can collect some stool. Your doctor can actually do that, but it's a little bit involved here. A few hours you can come back and do it more, but that is extremely accurate. Okay, that's even more accurate than genetic blood testing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So and you have to be open-minded. If these tests are normal and you keep on having symptoms, maybe to have them repeated in the future, because for example, some of these tests, blood tests, may not be positive if you haven't been eating gluten. You may have stayed off of gluten, you didn't get better than on the test. Well, because you haven't been eating gluten, those tests will not be positive. Keep that in mind. And you can even test it sometimes by have the patient, the person, eat more bread than usual. But you got to do it for 2 or 3 months before these guys down here change. It isn't that they change within hours or the next day, okay? And it's not like you ate a whole bunch of sugar and you get a blood test within an hour. This isn't how it works. It takes longer. So you got to be a little open-minded, and you got to do some reading. You got to look at these books, these websites. This book that I recommended, another one that I like, the Gluten-Free Bible. Again, reasonably thick here, but to use it as a reference book, I think is real value by Jacques Peters Lowell, and even has recipes in it. And I think it's a good book. Remember, I said you got to do a little bit of reading here. But as sick as this makes you, I think it's pretty darn good. In the genetic test, they look for the HLA-DQ2 or DQ8. That is specific for celiac disease. If it's positive, that genetic test is positive, you got it. Okay. The other advantage to it, if it is negative, it doesn't mean you couldn't have gluten sensitivity. It just means you don't have celiac disease. That rules it out. Okay. And the one you spit in the tube is called My Celiac ID. Home testing, you mailed it in a tube, and it's based on your saliva. Okay? Now, gluten can cause autoimmune diseases. Addison's disease is a well-known disease, and you can get rid of the disease by cutting out gluten most of the time, not every time. Okay? Hepatitis, there's a serious form of hepatitis strictly due to inflamed liver due to gluten. Crohn's disease, you hear that term a lot, Crohn's disease. Remember, gluten sensitivity and celiac disease just involves the first layer of the gut, okay? The mucosa, the first layer, okay? Crohn's disease involves all the layers of the gut, okay? the mucosa, the first layer, the muscle layer, the adventitia, the last layer. And so it's a lot more serious. But it can be seen with gluten. It isn't the cause of it isn't gluten every time, but that can be a problem too. Now, we spoke about doing biopsies, but biopsies have a little bit of risk. Mm-hmm. But you notice everybody go to, they right away recommend a biopsy and say it's the gold standard. Well, you're going to be a little skeptical here. You can ask around a little bit. Try the test. Why? Because it's not riskless. A lot of times involve preps where you got to take in a bunch of stuff and kill all your biome, your friends, your bacteria that run the metabolism in your body. They're all going to die just from the prep. And doing a biopsy, it's got to be 5 or 6, 7 places if you do it right. And you can miss it. You're not checking the whole tennis court, okay? And you can make a hole in the gut, and then you got a colostomy. I've seen it. So I didn't say don't do endoscopy, but ask your doctor the risk of the prep. Is he going to do a prep? The risk of the prep, and what would happen if things didn't work out correctly. They'll say it's 1% risk. It's higher than that. It's higher than that. I've read different books, so 20%. They're going to say, oh, not possibly. Well, when you consider the prep, there's risk in the prep. There's risk in the biopsy. So, but, it's life-saving. It's important. Other things that can be seen, it's autoimmune disease, myasthenia gravis, where you are periodically extremely weak. I've seen that. Raynaud's phenomena, scleroderma, lupus. Remember I spoke about that. Thyroid disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. These are all diseases that can occur from eating gluten. So remember, the best treatment for gluten problems, sensitivity, cellular disease, is prevention. So you got to develop knowledge. Today is the beginning of your knowledge. I am not your doctor here. I'm just trying to get you to open your mind to get tested. That's usually the biggest problem I see in healthcare. A lot of people just don't want to know, okay? So they're like type 2 diabetes. They don't want to know what causes it. But the reason I'm a little bit pushy here is that I can add 20 years to your life, and maybe more than that, because these illnesses from diabetes and gluten problems can kill you, make your life miserable, increase your bills, disable you, can blind you, can paralyze you. So to gain some knowledge, I think is extremely important, okay? Another book that I like, which I read through probably for the 3rd or 4th time, maybe 5th time, is Dangerous Grains, right here, Dangerous Grains, okay? Remember, this is about knowledge, and just if you read the cover, this is written by James Braley and Ron Hogan, and right on the cover, and it says, discover the benefits of a gluten-free diet in relieving and preventing the ailments associated with celiac disease, gluten sensitivity, and more than 200 chronic illnesses and conditions, including cancer, we mentioned that already, autoimmune disease, osteoporosis, broken bones, brain disorders, from very serious to mild, to memory loss, to Alzheimer's disease, preventable, intestinal disease, chronic pain. Some people present as chronic pain problem, and I've seen them before where they're addicted to narcotics because of it, because they have seen 10 doctors and they didn't figure it out. I've seen it. I'm seeing one tomorrow, and he's got diabetes and paralysis and eye changes, and I kind of wonder. I asked him when I saw him sitting in a coffee shop, he talked to me, never had a gluten test. hopefully it's positive, and the reason being I can probably turn a lot of that around. He's in a little bit advanced stage, but we can prevent him maybe from getting worse, a bit better, maybe add 10, 20 years to his life. And because he states he's been getting a lot worse. Incidentally, infertility and problematic pregnancies are common with ladies who have gluten problems. And those problems can then present in their babies. They can be born underweight, overweight. They may never get pregnant. And their children may have abnormalities, a small brain, may be paralyzed, may weigh only 2 or 3 pounds. That occurs. So it's very important. A woman becomes pregnant. That's the reason for the early testing. So before she becomes pregnant, she knows she has it. She can do corrective action. She is more likely to become pregnant. She is more likely to keep the baby, more likely to have a healthy baby. So that's why I'm a little bit pushy here. But keep a smile on your face. That's why I wore this jacket. I thought maybe we could laugh together a little bit, because if you're listening to this, you're really gaining a lot of knowledge. Let me go over a few other things. Let me refer back to the Gluten-Free Dummies book by Dana Korn, Korn. Look at her website. She wrote a book, too, for children. And if you're studying this partly because of kids or more kids you're going to have, I'd look at her book. I can't go through all of that today. But website she refers to, I will go through that. And she says, there's a picture of her raising her arm up, both of them. Get smart at dummies.com. Okay, and read her stuff. Dummies.com makes your life easier with 1,000 answers on everything from removing wallpaper to using the last version of Windows. Okay, but she has videos there, illustrated articles, step-by-step directions. Okay, so interesting. And the good news is that the list of foods you can eat is a lot longer than the list of foods that you can't eat. Now, isn't that good news? You may think, well, he's telling me in a path or something I can never follow. Wrong. You'll learn much more in food. You will introduce you to good food. And there's a substitute gluten-free for almost any food that you could dream up. Okay? So let's continue on this journey a little further here. One rule Dana Korn recommends, which is a good one: when in doubt, leave it out. Okay. For example, if you have a problem with celiac or gluten sensitivity, you must warn other people about it. Your other family members, for example. What are you going to do? Keep a kitchen for yourself? Remember I said one molecule could get you in trouble. You're going to have your family members all eat the same as you do. I doubt that they will. So you may need to learn a lot about a gluten-free kitchen, your part, their part. And in great detail, this book describes how to keep a gluten-free kitchen for yourself and still have your family eating foods with gluten in them. That's difficult. That's the reason I say you got to read some of these books here. So recognizing gluten-free foods at a glance. Some things you can't, obviously, and all of them, but some of them, okay? Forbidden grains, barley, remember oats, because of contamination from the way it's processed. They go through the same food line, okay? Triticale is a hybrid of wheat and rye, so learn about that. That's off the list, rye and wheat. They are slightly different proteins, rye and triticale. You know, they're slightly genetically different. They have different names, okay? And terms can confuse you. Wheat starch is actually wheat that has had the gluten washed out. So wheat starch can actually be a healthy food. But you got to learn more about that before you decide to buy that. Triticale is a made-up grain, artificially made grain, okay? Is a hybrid of wheat and rye. So they invented it to develop, so it could produce a lot more of it and feed a lot more people, okay? And change the genetic code, okay? And so wheat has several names and varieties, and you get to learn some of these names, like flour, bulgur, semolina, spelt, frumento, durum, kamut, graham, einkorn, farina, couscous, seitan. You see what I mean? It gets confusing. That's the reason you got to do some reading so you know what you're eating. And so wheat isn't what it used to be. They've genetically changed it. They can produce a lot more of it and feed the world. There's a doctor went to the Rockefeller Institute, late 1940s. Actually, he's in Minnesota. I was at a conference in Minnesota one time, Minneapolis, and I'm attending a national conference on wellness, and I'm walking between the buildings, and there's a picture of this guy. I'm sure nobody else walking by recognized who he was, but he was the guy walking through the wheat field looking at the wheat. But he was the guy that genetically changed wheat. Wheat used to be 12 feet tall and lean with the wind, but now it's 4 feet tall, standing straight up. That's the change, the triticale wheat. And it went all over the world, saved a lot of lives, but it also made a bunch of them sick. I mean, that's life. At least a lot of people survived, but they came down with some of these illnesses. Grains and starches that you can safely eat. Something good to know. Let me name a few. Beans, okay? Arrowroot, amaranth, okay? Buckwheat, chickpeas, corn, guava, millet, montina, potatoes, quinoa, ragi, rice, soy, taro root, teff. I gave a lot of things you can eat in their pure form and are safe to eat, okay? And they're starches, and they have some sugar in them. But you got to watch them a little bit, okay? So a gluten-free way of eating can result, if you're not careful, in weight gain because you feel, oh, there's no gluten. You start eating corn and rice like anything, and it breaks down to sugar eventually. It makes you feel good, like smoking a cigarette. You become addicted to it, and you gain a lot of weight. Now you're unhealthy from diabetes. Watch out. So you got to figure out how much of that you're going to eat, okay? Remember, I teach in my diabetes lectures, low carbohydrate, moderate protein, high fat. Learn what good fats are, healthy fats, not bad fats, good fats. That leads to a healthy life. That constructs a good way of eating. So just to eat gluten-free of rice and corn, soy, you can gain quite a weight. So other foods, they're usually gluten-free, but you got to be sure of it. Beans, dairy products can be, but remember what I said. If you get celiac disease, you don't have the enzyme that breaks down milk, and it could be a problem. Eggs are fine, fish, fruit, legumes, meat, nuts, poultry, seafood, vegetables, okay? Don't eat wheat meat. They're making meat out of wheat these days somewhat, as a way of vegetable type meat. In that, for example, seitan would be an example. It's called tofu in China. And so seitan means protein, okay? It's called tofu in China. foods that usually contain gluten. Beer, geez, beer. I'm a German. We drink beer. I used to be German. I'm American, but I lived there a while as a kid, and but I don't drink beer. No reason. I just don't drink it. And bread almost always has in it and bread crumbs. See, it's a problem if you're in the kitchen that's gluten-free. Even bread crumbs, remember, you can't have one molecule without a reaction. So even the crumbs are your enemy, okay? Communion wafers can have gluten in them. You go to church, the wafer can be gluten-free. Cookies, cakes, cupcakes, donuts, muffins, pastries, brownies, cornbread, crackers, croutons, gravies, sauces. Interesting. I mean, I don't think I'm gluten sensitive, but the other day I was eating out and I ate a bunch of gravy with some turkey and quite a bit of gravy because it seemed to taste so good. And mashed potatoes, which I don't usually eat, and I had a one-time, big-time bowel reaction. Coincidence? I don't know, but it makes you kind of wonder, doesn't it? To me, it seemed like maybe the gravy did it, maybe just one of those things. Maybe there was a contaminant in there, who knows? But usually gluten in pizza crust, pretzels, soy sauce, stuffing. And I already mentioned the good ones, the grains and superfoods, amaranth, arrowroot, millet. It's not a grain at all. Millet is actually a grass with small, round, ivory yellow kernels, and it's swell when you cook them. And, you know, I call it quinoa, but the way it's actually pronounced is quinoa. Quinoa. Okay, quinoa. The most nearly perfect source of protein from the vegetable kingdom. Let me say it again. Quinoa, okay? Quinoa, Kwinwa. That's how you pronounce it. Quinoa, okay, is the most neatly perfect source of protein, vegetable kingdom. And if you go to the grocery store, you'll see it as a fruit. And it usually be colored. It isn't really a grain, it's actually a fruit and a relative in the common weed. The National Academy of Science describes quinoa as the most nearly perfect source of protein. Hey, that's one for you, because we want some protein. If we're eating protein, we're not eating sugar. So that would be a healthier one. And it has vitamins in it, other amino acids. It has calcium, iron, vitamin E, assorted B vitamins, as well as fiber. It's usually pale yellow in color, but it always comes in pink, orange, red, purple, and black. And I've seen it as a beautiful fruit in the grocery store. Okay. And so knowing which foods you got to pay more attention to a little bit. Syrups, fillers, flavorings can have gluten in them, so you got to have gluten. Get your flavorings, you got to check them out, make sure they don't have gluten in them. Okay, seasoning, spice blends, stabilizers, starch, and pharmaceuticals. A lot of the drugs you take all have stabilizers in them. And remember, gluten is sticky. Okay, so you got to speak to the pharmacist. Is this gluten-free medication? Okay, and putting an end to the controversy over certain foods, but they have new labeling laws. So remember, I spoke about beer, for example, the malt. That's gluten. You can't have that. But there's some alcohols that don't have gluten, okay? Distilled alcohol, caramel color, citric acid, dextrin, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, HVP, modified food starch, starch in food, vanilla extract, vinegar, wheatgrass, yeast. These are, because of labeling controversies, these are now okay. And choosing alcoholic beverages, which some consume. Now that I'm 39 for the 44th time, I almost don't consume any, maybe a glass of wine here and there, but I don't even do that. So, but some things are gluten-free. Booze, brandy, cider, cognac, gin, rum, schnapps, tequila, vodka, tequila, okay. I used to drink tequila, I don't anymore. Wine, sparkling wine or champagne. So it's important to know that, and I want you to read through these books and then decide yourself, and not just take my word. So you get a second opinion, third opinion, okay? And but step away from the bottles of beer, distilled spirits that are added back to the mash, malt beverages, okay? Make sure your medications and supplements are safe. We spoke about that already. So it can be found in makeup. Remember our lipstick, yeah? Remember I talked about hairsprays, and stick them with I'm getting a haircut soon. I made the arrangements today, next week, Tuesday, 4 o'clock. And because I'm having to use too much pasty stuff, and I'm sure there's gluten in it, my hair hasn't fallen out. One of the reactions to gluten is alopecia, hair falls out. Mine is growing, so I guess maybe I don't have gluten sensitivity. Although I'm thinking of getting tested, just to be sure, because I do have a family member, one of my daughters has a child, a young girl. This is more common in women, incidentally. That's quite short. You wonder, okay? So make sure it's gluten-free, digging a little deeper. And so, because we've kind of loose labeling laws, okay? You have to watch out for it. So gluten-free may not mean 100%. You got to double check that. Sometimes you got to call them on the phone or check on the computer, look at a website. Defining safe amounts of gluten, they define that it's such an extremely small amount that you just forget about it. Such a small amount, smaller than a crumb, smaller than even a crumb. So I think you just got to stay free of it. And eating out can be a problem. You gotta, if you're going to someone's house to eat, I think you would call ahead and say that you get a gluten problem. One way of going to dinner with a date you got example might be to eat a bunch of gluten-free stuff before you even go to dinner, and then have a plain salad. And if you use a dressing, you know what's in the dressing, or call the restaurant and ask them, do you have a gluten-free menu? Some restaurants do. Good restaurants will have a gluten-free menu. That's a big one. So use a well-known restaurant. That's not going to happen probably in a fast food place because they'll be cooking on the same grill. In summary, look at some of these books I held up. I have another one, the Gluten-Free Diet, a Gluten-Free Survival Guide, because you got to survive. Here's another book I found to be quite handy. And the Living Gluten-Free, and these other books will have websites in them. Familiarize yourself with them. Double check things. Trust nothing. But you can lead a very healthy life. Gluten substitutes. Live to be 100. But if you're gluten sensitive, you may say, oh, I don't have to follow the rules, and you have a reaction now and then. But please get tested, gather information, look at my other websites, read these books. Why did I put this together today? Because I love you. I care about you. But you have to gather some information. If you see me for free at the pharmacy next to Concordia, I'll even teach you more. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope my jacket gave you a laugh. Have a great day. Namaste. See you next time.